Greetings, Bob Lusk here, the Pond Boss, hanging out with my good friend Mike Otto today. Mike, thanks for coming.
I appreciate the opportunity, Bob.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about what it takes to plan to build a pond in the lake. So if you'll just jump right in there and join us, we'll get this thing started. So you know what? We're going to start off with some questions. Let's see here. Anthony, you're on board. Good to see you. Mike Rivers, you're up. Good to see you guys. We're going to have a lot of fun today. You know, before we get going, I want to do my little commercial. ThePondBoss magazine, right here. $35 a year. We spend that much money taking our wives out to eat on Friday night, and this thing is just chock full of nuggets. So we would love to have you guys subscribe to ThePondBoss that don't already. Debbie Dobbs Lusk, my wife. Oh, she just clicked like, look at that heart going across the screen right there, Mike. All right,
oh,
so now
so
then,
cute.
I'm going to see if I'm going to see if I can get it up where we can look at it right here live, so we can see the questions on my laptop. I know it's going to be here any minute because we have an internet connection. There's Jacob West, Victor Moberg, Bear Brundrett looks like he's on board. So as soon as I can get this thing going on our computer here, tell you what, I'm not going to wait on that. I can see some of these questions. So Mike, what have you been doing lately? Where have you been working?
I'll tell you, Bob, I'm praying for rain every day. I'm praying for rain because that's the only time I get a day off. I've been working round the clock.
That's a good thing. You need that.
That was good when I was young.
Oh, yeah.
At 65, that ain't that good anymore.
How old are you now?
I'm
65.
yeah,
Holy
65.
cow. Wow, you're getting old. Or not. Well, you know, did have a few questions come on board. Looks like that, let me see here. I'm trying to get that video up. You know what? While I'm waiting on that, we had a few questions come across. The very first one that I want to read to you is, we had Bill Cody from the ThePondBoss Forum.
I love Bill.
We do. Bill is top notch. He says, one of the topics should include what to do to prevent or minimize leaks when planting a pond. Prevent leaks when planting a pond. All ponds leak that don't have a synthetic liner, Bill says. The amount of leakage is the big variable. In the experience of the professionals, how much leakage is normal in a well-compacted and sealed pond? Is there wording about leakage that should be included in the pond building contract? So let's start with that very first one. How much leakage is normal in a well-compacted and sealed pond?
Probably the first thing we need to talk about is how much evaporation you have. That's part of the leakage that goes. The truth of the matter is, a dam should be built solid enough that you don't see much water coming out of the back. It should, if you do have a leak, it ought to soak straight down into the ground. Anytime we get one that doesn't lose, maybe a half an inch every day or so in the summer, we consider that pretty good.
Okay, so you can attribute some to evaporation.
Right.
Because water, that magic substance, is going to take the path of least resistance.
Correct.
And sometimes that means it's going to absorb into the air.
That's right.
And evaporate.
That's exactly
So
right.
now the follow-up question that Cody asked was, is there wording about leakage that should be included in a pond building contract?
The best thing that a contractor could tell somebody that he's working for is that no pond is going to stay full like a swimming pool. They just don't do it. And for the landowner to expect at least a certain amount of seepage all the time.
So in the contract, there needs to be a clause that says your pond will seep and your pond will leak. Is that right?
That's correct.
You might as well expect it.
That's correct.
So what we want to do is kind of minimize that. So let's see here. Brian Lawrence, hello Mike and Bob. Bethany Lyndall Tolliver, hello Mike Otto. We're loving our pond you built in Bells, Texas.
All right, great.
You got a fan right
All right,
here.
who is it again?
This is Bethany Tolliver, Danny Tolliver.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then Brian.
The three little wild kids. Oh, they're great. I hope they're enjoying it. Did y'all ever get moved up there?
Yeah, she'll type up an answer here in a minute. See, we got Anthony Abate from outside Chicago, Illinois, getting his Wednesday night fix. Jacob West, hey, Bob and Mike. Brian Lawrence. Lance Faber. Hey, Lance, let me tell you something. We did the drawing last week for the ThePondBoss mug and the ThePondBoss hat. Guess what? You won. So this will be coming out to Lance Faber. Now, If you want to win and have a chance to at some of these prizes like this ThePondBoss hat and the ThePondBoss mug, what you need to do this right now if you don't mind. Put hashtag PondBoss Magazine in the comments. Click on like the video and share the video to your news feed, and that will enter you automatically into the drawing. All right, John Henry, Scott Lindsay, Leo Wynn, all the way from California, Tim Cook from down in San Marcos, New Braunfels area. Tim Cook is a BASS conservation director. He is an avid fisherman, just a fantastic guy.
Great. Good to have you
John
here.
Henry has done it. Mark Sanders from over there at Tyler. Let's see, Danny's telling Mike he's got a little conversation. Bethany says our kids are still wild. Danny says we just moved up here in December. Michael Gray, our good pond building buddy from outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Michael, glad you're on board. Looks like Don Winterroud's on board. Victor Moberg, he's got that ThePondBoss Magazine hashtag going on right there. See it there? Bud Rogers, Van Alstine, Anthony Abate's put it in there. Jacob got his hat and mug today. We're welcome, buddy. Elmo Liner, Jim Liner from Ray Scott Outdoors, BASS founder up there. He says, great to have a guest, even for a comment or two. That's good. Leanne Hartzell, she's our marketing director. She's at a stock show today, so she's checking in remotely, so we're glad you guys are there. So Michael, Otto.
Yes.
He says, now, speaking along those same lines, here's one from Facebook, and I got to meet this guy just because of his name, even if it's not the right name. He's logged in as Biff Cadiddlehopper. I love that.
Yeah, I do too.
I wanted to ask Mike what he considers acceptable leakage. I lose about half an inch per day off a little over an acre pond, or about 15,000 gallons per day. The pond is 14 feet deep at the pool level, so even in the current drought, the fish are doing okay, but it's pretty frustrating.
I tell you what, water loss is our biggest. If we have 3 calls a day, 2 of them about water loss. It depends on how fast it gets filled back up. You know, if you're in a place where you get plenty of rainfall, it's not a very big deal. A half an inch a day over a month, you're starting to suffer pretty bad. I don't know that there's anything we can do about it. You know, pray for rain is about our best bet.
You know, and Biff, I'll throw this in there with Mike. You know, during the hottest time of the summer, when the humidity's low and the temperature's high, you can expect half an inch a day to go in evaporation.
That's right.
But if you've got half an inch going on now every day, then that water's leaving somehow. And you know, one of the things I tell people is what holds water better than anything on the planet? A bathtub, except for that little bitty hole down in one end. You know, if your pond has any seams or any veins of gravel or fractures or soils that aren't compacted, you're going to lose water. Now, Mike, if somebody wants to go find a leak, how do they do that? What would you say? What would you tell them?
Always look on the backside of the dam. There's normally about 3 places where leaks will show up. One will be in the very deepest part of the field of the dam, usually around where there is a pipe, a drain pipe, or an overflow pipe. That's where we see most of the leaks, but also where the dam is tied into the original terrain. A lot of times that is not cored properly. Maybe we have got a little bit of grass left right there. So it's not unusual to have a slick foundation seep, and then also up on the side of the hills where it's tied into the hills. That's also a pretty good place for it to be to look for leaks.
Now, if somebody goes on the back side of a dam and they find water seeping out, can they automatically assume that that's where the water's coming from?
Occasionally, there's a possibility that there could be a spring pretty close to the back of the dam. Okay. I wouldn't bet on that.
Okay, so if you're on the back side of the dam and you see water coming out
Yes.
of the dam,
Yes.
that water could just be meandering all the way through the dam, or it could be just running straight through, but there's no law in this little pond building book that says that it's going to go in a straight line to come out.
That's correct. Now, this is what you want to look for if you see a seep on the back side of your dam. If the water is dirty, if it's coming out of the back of your dam and the water's dirty.
Like muddy dirty?
Yeah, muddy,
okay.
Dirty, off-colored. That tells you that the water is picking up particles. We're starting to have an erosion process in the dam.
Okay.
And when that happens, you need to keep a close eye on that. When water's coming through a dam and it's relatively clear, if it's not tunneling, if it's not eroding the inside of the dam, we don't like it, but it's not near as dangerous, we're not near as worried about it as if when water's coming through, it is carrying particles.
So if the water's muddy, that leak won't heal.
Most of the time it does not. That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Hey, I see James Blakely joined in. Hey, James. James is a local earth mover right here, right around the corner from us. He builds a lot of ponds. Say hello to Bear Brundred again. Bobby Rice checking in from Florida. Jerry Ohlert, from one of our videographer buddies from down around San Antonio. A lot of the ThePondBoss videos that have been done, Jerry Ohlert's done them. If you want to get a professional videographer, check in with Jerry Ohlert. Scott Lindsay, so Joe Herbertson. How you doing, Joe? Glad you're on. That's Dinsmore Outdoors. So let's see. You know, another question that came up here, Mike. Now this is from Chris Kravalovic. He says, I have an old 1.5 acre pond where the spillway pipe is rusted out 5 feet below permanent pool. Can I plug the pipe and just use the emergency spillway? I would concrete at the top of the dam spillway and then put riprap the rest of the way down to control erosion behind the dam. Would I need more than 2 feet of freeboard to the top of the dam? The rusted pipe is 12 inches. I don't have a lot of money to do the job right. So why don't we take that last thing? We don't have a lot of money to do the job right.
If you don't have much money to do it right, you're doing it exactly the way you need to do it.
All right. So now he's got this pipe that's rusted out, which is probably a corrugated
metal pipe.
Okay.
And if it's not rusted, it will rust soon.
Okay, so now it's rusted out 5 feet below the pool, which means this pond stays 5 feet low. So should he plug that?
Yes.
How should he do it?
Okay, this is how we normally do that. We will stick sacks of saccrete down into that pipe and fill it to the top with saccrete. You can mix it before you put it in there, harden it up. That is about as good and cheap a way as you can, as there is to get the pipe shut off from water running through.
Okay, so you just get up on top of the pipe, bust open some sacks of concrete, pour them in it.
That's right.
And just fill it all the way up.
All the way to the top.
And then, or you can mix it if you want to mix it. But you can pour it in there dry.
Yes.
Add water, or let the pond add water.
Let the pond add water.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's the cheap way to do it. Now that he's plugged up his primary overflow, his primary spillway, what about the emergency? Because now his emergency spillway becomes the spillway. So what should he do there?
Okay. Now, if the emergency spillway has carried your water in your big floods characteristically forever, don't worry about enlarging it. Concreting it is just fine. The truth of the matter is when water gets to the emergency spillway, the overflow pipe, the primary spillway, does not carry enough water to make any difference. So truthfully, what you're doing is a good way to do it. From an engineering standpoint, that's exactly the way an engineer would tell you to do that unofficially. Officially, he would tell you to tear the dam down, pull the pipe out, put a new pipe in, enlarge the spillway and concrete the whole thing. But what you're doing is sure the way to do it. It's safe. Don't think about spending a bunch of money on that. I would say you've done a good job of trying to figure this out.
All right. Now he's also talking about concrete in the emergency spillway.
That's right.
So the concrete there is to minimize erosion problems, but then he wants to put riprap on the back side. Now, the experience I've seen with ponds is if you've got too steep of a grade, that riprap's not going to make any difference. And Michael Gray, there's an article in ThePondBoss magazine about Michael Gray's working some stuff in Tennessee where he's had to come back in several times and repair a spillway that had been riprap just because of the volume of water moving the rocks. But in theory, he's got a good idea.
He does have a good idea, and there's two ways to keep those rocks in place. Number one is they make a product called gabion chute. That's a fancy way to say chain link fence. Wrap the rock that you put in the spillway with hog wire chain link fence, and that will make it almost impossible for that water to move. One rock the size of a pickup is easily rolled. 3 rocks wrapped in chain link fence, you can't hardly get them to move.
Ah, good stuff.
Put a liner, put a piece of plastic, a piece of rubber underneath of the riprap. Also, we have a scattered, a sprinkled a concrete truck full of concrete on that riprap, and that also will hold that in.
Okay. All right. So put the riprap down, and then when you get a few dollars ahead, bring a concrete truck in and fill the gaps between the riprap.
That's right. It'll hold it together. You bet.
Okay, let's see. Alex Shorts joined in. Lanny Davis is on board. Let's see. Todd Austin, Jim Fritch. Howdy. All right, we got Anthony Abate has asked a question. How do you determine minimum and maximum pond depths? How deep should a pond be?
We don't ever like to dig one any less than 8 foot deep where we're at in the state of Texas. We do that only for storage. I've been told that we can only manage the top half of the depth of a pond. So if you've got one that's 10 foot deep, the top half is 5 foot. The problem is there's a good chance that that lake, your pond, will sink down to 5 feet. So you need to have that extra depth for storage.
So storage for evaporation
and seepage. Yeah, okay. That's correct. Okay. Also, shallow water, as you've told me 100 times, is the biggest enemy that we've got in a pond.
Yep, shallow water is a problem. Okay, so now let's see here. Lance Farber, I have a seep in my dam that stops leaking when the water level drops 16 inches. Could this be from burrowing animals?
It could very easily be from burrowing animals, roots from trees, but also water weighs a different amount. 3 foot of water weighs twice as much as 1.5 foot of water, and it's got more pressure on it. So that's not just necessarily a leak that you could find like a hole in a bathtub. The extra weight could be what is forcing the water out of your pond. Mm-hmm.
A gallon of water weighs 8.3 pounds. So when you start piling water up on top of itself, it's pretty dadgum heavy.
Yes, it is.
Okay, let's see here. Danny Tolliver, if it's a steep grade and it's washing the riprap out, you can put concrete in its place. Okay, that's good. Scott Hanners. Good to see you, Scott. Jerry Morris, Robert Geeson, Rusty Hart. Let's see here. Scott Hanner says, how do you know when you should or shouldn't get a permit from the COE? Do you think some of these regulations may ease up in the future? Okay, so we're talking about, and hello, Jerry Morris. So Scott's question is, what about permitting? What do you tell clients about? Okay, you know what? We're going to get back on the topic a little bit. We're answering questions, so let's kind of add a little bit more order to this conversation. When somebody gets ready to plant a pond, and the first time you talk to them, you meet them, what are some of the things you tell people early on?
There's a couple of ingredients that you have to have. Number one, you need to have water. You need to have dirt that holds water relatively well. You need to have some topography to help out with.
Topography meaning you don't really want to build a pond on flat ground.
That's right.
Is that what you mean?
That's what I'm talking about as far as that goes.
All right.
They need to kind of get an idea of a budget, and then at the same time, they need to make a list of stuff that they want when they're done.
Okay, so set some goals.
That's exactly right.
Figure out the size of the watershed.
That's correct.
And then figure out what kind of soils you've got.
Yes.
That's what you do. Okay, so that's the first visit of when you get ready to plant a pond.
Yes.
So now you're going to get into the further planning. So they say the watershed is 100 acres. We're in central Oklahoma. Our average rainfall is 35 inches a year.
Yes.
And how big a pond can we build? And it's in a draw, and there's red clay all around. So what's the next thing that you do in your planning process before you move any dirt?
We tell them that with an evaporation rate of with a rainfall rate of 35 inches a day, we say that a pond that has 100 acres of drainage, you can build about a 10-acre pond. Okay, if it fits the site.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in that part of the planet, 10 acres of watershed per acre of
That's
pond.
correct. Yeah, 10 to 1.
Okay, so now if we're looking at going back to the depth question that was asked a while ago, if we're going to go build a pond in New Mexico where it rains 12 inches a year, and 6 of that might be runoff, we need that pond to be 35 feet deep and have a watershed, of probably 60 acres per acre of pond.
That's
all right?
That's correct.
But when we go over to Alabama where they get 60 inches of rain, then the watershed needs to match up the volume of rain.
That's right.
And then part of the depth, you decide the depth so you can compare the amount of rainfall to evaporation, and that tells you how deep it needs to be.
That's right.
A fish hatchery pond is never deeper than about 4 or 5 feet.
Okay.
Because they have water.
something that we need to consider. Most of the time, people want as much depth as possible. Very seldom do I have anybody that says, I would like to have a shallow pond.
Okay, so how much depth is too much?
Most of the time, that depends on what it's going to cost. I've got a customer right now that said he wanted a pond that's going to be 35 foot deep. And I told him that I could sure build him a pond that would be 35 foot deep. We've got about 15 feet of what Mother Nature's going to offer us. So he wants me to dig another 20 foot in depth. I don't mind doing that, be glad to do it. It's going to be pretty expensive to do it. So there comes a time that the budget has to kick in for most people.
Okay. Part of the question a while ago was, what's the minimum depth?
You said it yourself in Alabama, where the pond is replenished all the time. 5, 6, 7, 8 feet is probably plenty.
Okay.
As long as it stays full.
So the minimum would be the maximum in that case.
That's correct.
So, but when you're designing shorelines, you're looking for what kind of a slope?
We want a slope that is steep enough that the sunlight will not hit the bottom of the ground. You want to take one step and still be safe. You know, if you're walking out into the water, a 3-to-1 slope below the water line is usually pretty acceptable.
Okay, because if an animal or a child or somebody falls in it, they can get out. Or if it's a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1, it's a pretty steep drop.
That's right. There is no animal that livestock or wildlife that will ever go into a pond that they can't get out of. Mm-hmm. Most mothers are going to keep a pretty good eye on their kids, so they're not going to let that happen. It's probably going to happen to me and you on a 4-wheeler sometime when we're out drinking wine. That's when that gets
When did you start drinking wine? Okay, let's see here. Here's Jerry Morris. In Wisconsin, how deep should your pond be to avoid winter kill? You want to tackle that?
I do not. You take that one, Bob.
All right. You know, the thing about winter kill, it's not quite as important, the depth of the water, as the age and fertility of the water. So if you've got, Jerry, if you've got a lot of plants or a heavy plankton bloom, that's going to be more likely what's going to cause a winter kill. So the depth is not quite as important, but to give you a direct answer, shoot for 10 feet. If you can get 10 to 12 feet, you know, the guys that I work with up north, they think 10 to 15 feet. So somewhere in that range would be good. But on another subject, we need to talk about how to prevent winter kill or how to manage to avoid winter kill during the spring and the summer months. Tori Rhodes is on board. For those of us looking at a liner pond install, I know the edges need to be buried. Does dirt need to be put into the basin? So in other words, I think this question, Mike, is now we're going to build a pond, put a liner in. It's going to be the edges. So you're going to put the edges in a trench.
There'll be an acre trench around the whole pond.
A what trench?
An anchor.
Anchor trench.
Anchor
okay.
Trench.
Okay, so the liner goes into that trench, and then you fill that up with dirt.
That's correct.
And pack it.
That's correct.
Okay, should there be dirt in the basin of the pond? Should there be dirt on top of the liner? That's the question.
We have never put a liner in that we did not cover it with dirt. We've done that for 2 reasons. One is we don't want it punctured for any reason ever by accident or on purpose, but also the life expectancy of those synthetic liners is the sun. And so the more we can keep the sun off of that, the longer the liner will last.
Okay, so I'm sure there's a process because you've got to clean the basin of that pond to get it smooth, and then you put the liner in. So it's got to be put onto something pretty soft without a bunch of rocks that can puncture the liner.
That's right.
Okay.
There's a lot of handwork. There can be a lot of handwork done before you install a liner. We have got a smooth drum roller to help push the rocks and the hard dirt down in to make it where the liner is not punctured.
So that's before you ever put the liner in. So then you put the liner in it, and
yes.
Now you're going to put some kind of, what kind do you put, sand on it? What sticks to the liner? What kind of dirt can you put on the liner?
We have never hauled material in. We always use material that we excavated out of the pond or some material that is on site. Now, that's not saying that we wouldn't buy some material from someplace else that would, because maybe the material is too rocky, got too many dirt clods in it or something like that. The liner needs to be laid on a slope that is much flatter than a 3-to-1. Mm-hmm. Dirt will not lay on that. It will slide down to the bottom. Once, the first time you cover up a liner, the first time a contractor covers up the liner, it's the most stressful time of his entire life. Once you've done it once, it's really pretty easy to do that.
Because you get the methods in the process.
That's correct.
Hey, we've had a lot more new people join in. Look at here, PondBoss magazine comes out every other month, $35 a year. I'm going to ask you to subscribe because this is what fuels the economy of what you're being able to see tonight. And also tonight, if you will, in the comment section, hashtag PondBoss magazine, like the video, and share it to your news feed, you get into a drawing for a PondBoss hat and a PondBoss mug. Lance Faber won it last week. So now, there's my commercial. Thanks for joining up. Let's see, who else is up here? Mike, there's Andy Benson from Mossback Fish Habitat. We use a lot of mossbacks because when people are building ponds and lakes, a lot of times they don't necessarily think about habitat. A lot of, and you're one of these outstanding exceptions to the rule in earth moving, where most earth movers think that a smooth bottom pond is a pretty pond.
That's right.
And so we come across quite a few of those ponds that have been built, and we use a lot of mossbacks. But when you're building habitat, what thought process do you use? Because first of all, you got to build the dam and the spillway because that's job one.
That's right.
And then behind that, there's going to be a fishing pond or whatever.
Yeah.
So what thought process do you go through, and how do you talk to the landowner about that sort of thing?
Never do we leave that untalked about. That is when a landowner wants a pond built, they take for granted that it's going to hold water, that we're going to use good material, that it's going to have good workmanship with that stuff. And they're mainly interested, the truth of the matter is they're mainly interested in this being a good recreational pond. So we spend lots of time, maybe we'll have a field day and take them to a pond that we're working on or one that we've already finished that doesn't have water in them and show them what we're talking about. We try to build some pathways for fish to travel. We make benches all around the pond if it's at all possible to do that. The bottom of the pond we will have maybe a little bit deeper canal. Some of the dirt that comes out of that canal, we will build some mounds under the water. We will leave islands under the water and all the way to the top of the water. So we start thinking about that from the very beginning. We understand that structuring 30 foot of water does not mean anything. It may look good when the pond's dry, adds up to nothing. So we try to work that in areas that will be productive for fish. Also, at the same time when we're doing that, we want to say, we've got too much shallow water here. That's a good place to try to deepen the shoreline and make some structure out.
So how do you do that? So let's say you got a pond that's going to be 4 acres, and over an acre of that's going to be water less than 3 feet deep, which we don't really want that.
No.
So what do you do?
Okay, you've got a couple of options with that. Number one, if it's 100 feet of width and it goes from 0 depth to 3 foot of depth, we might try to cut that in half. Shrink the surface area of the pond, come out about 50 feet of that 100, dig it down 4, 5, 6 feet, and then put that up into the area that was only a foot or 1.5 feet.
Okay, so what you'll do there is you'll give up a little bit of surface area by pushing some dirt up to get your depth, and maybe leave like a flat, wide peninsula. Or
yeah, you bet.
What you're talking about?
Yeah,
okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's see here. We got more questions. Let me look at them here. We've got Michael Harrelson's on board. You know that guy.
Yeah. He's supposed to be working. What's he doing here?
Michael works for Mike. And let's see. Chris Garton. Great info tonight. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you, Chris. Chris Rigoni. Just under 1 acre pond in Upper Michigan. I have a natural spring that will need to be rerouted to fill my pond. Should I have the water come in at the opposite end of the discharge, or reroute the inlet to the same general area of the discharge? Okay, so he's got a spring coming in.
Yeah.
Where should it feed into the pond?
Yeah, the closest place you can get it in.
Okay,
yeah.
There's your answer.
And make sure that you do not cause an erosion problem when you turn it loose into the pond. That's a real good place to do a little bit of artsy, craftsy stuff. Doll it up, get some rocks, put a liner under where that water's coming in, and whatever you need to do, don't let it erode all the way back to the spring. The closest place is always best.
Okay, so Great, that's great advice. Now, here's also what Mike's kind of alluding to is when you reroute a spring, you're going to send it over new soil. And it's likely to erode that soil, or the soil can absorb it and your spring goes away. So when you reroute the spring, think about that as you change the course. What Mike's saying is you can create a cool looking trout stream going from the source of the spring into your pond if you want.
Perfect.
You can create holes. You can put, pooling and ponding and run it across rocks. So be creative when you do that. Let's see here. Joe Herbertson, I got lucky with my pond. I can't wait to hear about luck.
Yeah.
The contractor dug my pond for free. He sold off the topsoil and the hard pan himself for payment. So this guy needed some dirt because he had a project somewhere. The deepest part is 20 feet with a 12-foot shelf. Once they hit clay is where they stop digging. Okay, so here we go. Somebody approaches you and says, I'd like to take some dirt and leave you a pond. What's the pros and cons of that? So if somebody says, I need that dirt, what are the upsides? I mean, for Joe, it worked out just fine because they went into good dirt that holds water. What are some of the pros and cons about that?
Well, most of the time when somebody is looking for dirt to either build house pads or roads, shoulders of roads, the dirt that they're looking for is not the same kind of dirt that will hold water good. They're looking for a little bit sandier, loamier material that will not shrink and swell like clay does. So the key word that I heard there was when they got down to the clay, they
stopped digging.
They stopped digging.
Okay.
So if your pond is full of water and it stays full, you've hit a home run. Most of the time, we cannot give away clay. We can always sell topsoil. The problem with that is that's pretty valuable.
Most people want to keep their topsoil.
Yeah. I'm not saying that that's not a good deal. If it holds water, it was a great deal.
So when you make the deal with them, one of the cons is that it's likely to leak. So in your agreement with them, they take that clay that's left behind and line the pond with the clay. So where they've taken sand or gravel or whatever they're taking or topsoil, what I hear you saying is you need to work it out where they take the remaining clay and shape it and form it so that the chances of a leak are a lot less.
Yeah, and you can be as specific as you want with that. You can tell them 2 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches. The bottom line is tell them that you want this pond to hold water when they leave. And now the ball is in their court. They'll be responsible for either putting a clay liner, maybe adding some kind of additive, or maybe some kind of synthetic liner.
So there's some caveats to that. So think about that before you enter into that agreement. Let's see here. We've got Dick Tabbert. Thanks, guys. Interesting stuff. You're welcome. Glad you joined us. Let's see. We got Don Winterroute. How much sediment can you expect to get in your pond on the initial fill-up? Will you lose much of your maximum depth? So in other words, when it starts to rain and all these disturbed soils, where do you go? What happens with that?
Well, we try as hard as we can to eliminate as much of that as possible. We'll have erosion logs where water is coming in to try to slow that down. We have had some erosion fences. You see these things all over the country. We learned this from the highway department. They have got fences made out of plastic and hay that will slow that water down. Any money that you spend slowing the initial filling down is not money that is wasted by any means. You're not going to get it all. You can't get it all. Oftentimes we will dig a sediment pond upstream to try to catch as much the dirt that's eroding into the pond, and we do that especially if there's an active farm field up above us. Water is always going to carry dirt. I have looked at golf courses where they have a tremendous turf, and when water runs across it, it will carry some of the dirt with it. So you're going to get some of that. Do not worry at all. Do not try to cut a corner on slowing that down on the first time around.
Okay, good.
Get good grass established as soon as possible.
Good call. Anywhere you have disturbed dirt, if you can get grass growing on it, one of the things I've told people is when a pond first starts to fill on those first 2 or 3 rains, it's a wise idea to use that water to irrigate all the disturbed dirt and get some grass growing on it.
Yeah.
Rather than, they want to put fish in that 3 feet of water. And what I'd rather see them do is take some of that water and pump it up and get grass growing to minimize that. I had a call from a guy today, Mike, that is out near Comanche, Texas, and has a fourth generation ranch out there that they used to hunt and fish. And they're thinking about building an 8 to 10 acre lake, and he told me that they have an 1,100 acre watershed that's going to feed into this area. So my advice to him was you need to design a big dam, and if all you want is a 10 acre lake, you got to figure out how to divert some of that watershed or put some sediment ponds in the watershed to slow the water down. So the amount of sediment that you're going to get is based on what kind of ground it's coming off of. And some of these sediment ponds that I know you've built, they do a good job of stopping that. You got any thoughts about?
Yeah, when you're working with 1,100 acres, do not try to tackle that by yourself. Almost any engineering firm will be glad to size a spillway for you. Be sure and get that done. And then what Bob was talking about is absolutely correct. Any money that you spend upstream is well worth it, including having grass established before the pond is ever even built. You know where the water line is going to be, everything up above there. If you can possibly do it, get good turf established on that, you'll be happy you did.
Will Kitley joined in. Mike Muley joined. Billy Birch. Hey, Billy, down southeast Texas. Dick Tabbert's on board. Let's see here. We got Jim Liner. Thanks for bringing the old pro Mike into the show. He is the pond building guru. I sent him my new ThePondBoss subscription today. Thanks, Jim. Jim Liner. Brian Lawrence. What is the best way to put out a mossback attractor on a 3-to-1 slope? Outstanding question. You can anchor those. And actually, mossback will help you design the right kind of attractors just for your pond. That's one of my favorite things about mossback and Andy Benson and the team over there at Mossback. And they've got some that won't roll. They've got some with anchors where you can anchor them with a concrete block. They've got all kinds of interesting stuff. You know, one thing I forgot to do, Mike has written a book called Just Add Water.
Oh, thank God. My goodness.
If you're getting ready to build a pond, you need his book. Holy cow. Mike, you want to run and get one back there?
Yeah, I'll run and get one. I'll get one of Bob's also. Bob has also written a book. So I'll get a copy of both of them and we'll run a little.
All right. And in the meantime, I'll entertain everybody while he goes and gets those books. And thanks to Christina Otto Harrelson for reminding me of that. I see her there. Let's see, Brian Lawrence, what's the best way to put out that mossback? They'll help you with that. But if I can't remember all the names of the products. Forgive me there, Andy. But the trunks are like 4-inch pipe with limbs, and you can design those and put them in an angle where they won't slide down that slope. Let's see here, John Henry, what's the downside with the shallow water and how shallow is too shallow? Here's the downside of shallow water while Mike's running to get these books. Here he comes.
I'm running full speed.
The downside to shallow water is it vegetates. You know, and you'll get so much vegetation that it's just annoying. And the amount of money that you spend up front to minimize shallow water is actually money well spent, because if you don't do that and you figure out later on that the moss is killing you, it's too much, you're going to spend within 3 years of trying to treat that vegetation, you'll spend more money than you would have paid him to do the dirt work in the first place.
Let me talk a little bit more about that. There are two other real terrible problems with shallow water. Number one is shallow water evaporates faster than deep water. If you've got a 1 acre pond that's 1 foot deep, it will be completely gone and there will be grass growing in it before you'll lose a foot of water off of a pond that has 10 foot of depth. Another thing that's bad about shallow water is when the water level goes down 1 foot or 2 foot or 3 foot, the surface area often shrinks to 1/3 or 1/2 of what it was originally.
That's exactly right.
So don't take any chances on shallow water, ever.
I helped design a lake in Mexico, and you can't find topo maps in Mexico. Well, we weren't sure if it was going to be 70 acres or 600 acres. And there was so much brush and weesatch and cactus and stuff that when the lake filled up, it was actually 400 acres. But when it dropped 2 feet, it was 60 acres. So there was a huge amount of shallow water.
Right.
Here's Mike's book, Just Add Water. And I tell you what, we're going to make a deal right now. If anybody orders this book within the next 24 hours, actually the first 10 people that order this book, I'm going to toss in a subscription to ThePondBoss for free. So that's $30 plus freight for Mike's book, and then a $35 subscription to ThePondBoss for a year. So you ought to jump on that if you can. And tell your friends.
Yeah. I'm going to get one.
You going to buy a book?
I'm going to buy a book.
When are you going to read it?
Yeah.
The other book that we have that can help you when designing a pond is called Perfect Pond, Want One. And that's one that I've done to help you select land and how to pick out the right site and things like that. Sean Banks from Midwest Lake Management up outside of Kansas City. Glad to see you, buddy. My daughter Lindsay back, she's joined up. Jacob West, great book. Jacob bought it, and he's probably read it more than Mike's read it. Kent C. DeWagans, any ideas, uses, positives, negatives with native plants? Simply out of the box thoughts. Well, native plants, you do want some aquatic plants because that's part of the habitat. That's where little bitty fish can go and hide and survive long enough to become a significant part of your food chain. So native plants, we like those. Now, the thing is with designing and planning to build a pond is you want them to grow where you want them to grow, not necessarily over there wherever they want to grow. So it's a wise idea to plan that out in the early stages when you're going to build a pond. Danny Tolliver says, Mike's book is great. So there's several people on here that have bought it. Bruce Condello, our buddy from Lincoln, Nebraska is on board. Mike Rivers question. Stephen Barden. Hi, Stephen. He's a fisheries biologist. Texas Pro Lake Management. Glad to see you on board, buddy. Let's see here. Mike Muley, link. Okay, how do you buy a book? You go to the ThePondBoss.com website store, and you can buy it online there, or you can, we have this fancy graphic right here. Look at that. info@ThePondBoss.com, where you can email or call the office during business hours, and we'll see to you that you get one. Fancy graphics right here. We don't spare any expense on our graphics. All right, so let's see. Mike Rivers says, I own a small pond that the previous owner had redug. The dozer operator hit blue mud and told it would cost much more to finish. The landowner said to close the dam back up. So my pond is dug out nice on the upper end and an island of mud near the dam where it should be deep. Any hope of redoing it? I'm in Tennessee. Okay, you know what I'm going to tell you? Mike will give you the earth moving answer, but if you'll scroll back through the comments and send a private message to Michael Gray,
Right.
He's the guy that knows Tennessee really well. So, Mike, just a quick answer on that.
That's real difficult to do if you've already got water in the pond. If the water's not in there, that's easy to get out of there. Get an excavator, dump truck, get it out. Get it out now. If it's already got water in it, pump it out and get it out. You'll be the time that you spend doing that right now. You'll be glad you did it for the rest of your life, your kid's life, and your grandkids' life.
Outstanding.
Yeah,
That's right. You know, and one of the things that I tell people is, plan.
Yes.
Because the minute that heavy equipment shows up and they move this much dirt, you've changed the ecology of that environment for 5 generations at least beyond you. And then my next question is, do you know who your great-great-grandfather was, any of them, and what they did? And most time people can't answer that. So the decisions you're getting ready to make as you plan a pond are going to be real important decisions. Let's take another question, then I want to circle back and get more into the planning phase since that's our topic, and it is 7:13. Laney Davis says, on a 10-acre rebuilt lake that likely will have some carryover vegetation after the cleanout, what would your first step be at reestablishing desirable plant life? Plans are to completely lime the new bank shores after everything is in place and the wait begins for rain. Well, we'll do a rain dance for you as well, Lanny. I don't know that I would plant any plants early on because since it's a rebuilt lake, odds are really high that you've got some seeds and some tubers and some things there that where your plants are going to start to grow. So I would wait and see what happens. Now, if plants don't grow, then pick out some native local plants and put them in an exclusion fence so that turtles don't come and eat them. So that would be a good way to handle that. But let nature, see what nature's going to do and see how that can work too. So now let's let's go back to the planning stages, Mike. So,
All right.
so we've got the watershed figured out. We've got the dirt figured out. It's yes, we have good dirt. The watershed's suitable. We know how big the pond should be. We've got the dam kind of sited where we want it.
Right.
What's next in your planning phases?
The thing that I like to do next, either on a map or on the ground, is kind of delineate where the shoreline's going to be. That way you'll make sure that, of course, it's not going to go across your neighbor's fence, but also will give you some ideas of anything else that you want to do around that pond. We've already talked about 3 or 4 acres of shallow water. You know, the best way to eliminate that is before you start, either raise the spillway or lower the spillway somewhere, whatever makes the most sense with that. It'll also tell you about what kind of trees you've got. You know, we've got some trees in this part of the country that are 100-year-old. We don't want to put a foot of water on a 100-year-old tree. Those are the times to maybe lower your spillway just a little bit. So the next thing that I would do was find out just exactly where water's going to be when this thing is full.
Okay, so in other words, you take your laser transit out there and you figure out the elevation about where you think that the water line is going to be, and then you flag it or you stake it.
Yes.
Then you can step back and begin to visualize what that pond's going to look like and what it's going to be shaped like. So every pond, what I think I hear you say is every pond has a limiting factor.
You bet it does.
Okay, so the limiting factor is going to be you can only go up so high and then it spills over somewhere else, or it backs up on a neighbor's property, or over a road, or it's going to come up too close to a tree that you don't want to lose.
That's correct.
Okay.
Or you run out of money. Yeah.
Well, that happens quite a bit.
That stopped a lot of people.
Yep. And so Lanny Davis on your 10-acre rebuilt, I think we got that pretty well covered. Let's see, Kenneth, can I use warm season grasses? Let's see here. Uh-oh, I just lost that. Here we go. Can I use warm season grass on the dam so I can burn it off each spring? Okay, so in other words, Kenneth, I'm not quite sure where you are, but the question is, can I use warm season grasses on the dam and then burn it off each spring?
I'm sure you can. My question is, why would you want to get grass off of your dam?
Okay, so in other words, if you've got your slopes right, you can mow it. Then you don't have to burn it off. So if what I hear you saying, I think, is if the grass is too tall, you don't want it to be too tall, can you burn it off? Mike's got a legitimate question. Why would you want to burn it off? You know, because its job is to hold those soils in place. And if you burn the grass off, then you increase the risk of erosion, and you don't want that on a dam.
Yeah. The life expectancy of your dam is twofold. Number one is how it was constructed, and number two is what kind of vegetation you have on it.
Okay, so now we've designed the dam. We know where it's going to sit. You figured out. So part of the pre-planning is now how big is the dam going to be. So now you begin to calculate the volume of dirt.
That's correct.
So okay, so now how you do that? Just the Cliff's Notes version.
Well, the easy answer to that is its length times width times height, and you divide that by 27. So that
say that again. That's okay. A good tip.
The way that we calculate dirt in a dam is we measure how tall the dam is at its tallest point, and then that will help us calculate the width at its widest point.
Okay.
So we'll go width times height, and then we will multiply that number by the length of the dam.
Okay.
And then we'll divide that by 27, and that'll convert it to cubic yards.
And there's 27 because that's how many cubic feet there are in a cubic yard.
That's correct.
Okay, so really you're figuring out the geometry of what the dam with the slopes are going to be, and the width of the top of the dam and the width of the bottom of the dam.
That's correct.
So you're doing a little bit of geometry. So once you figure out how many cubic yards of dirt you're going to move, then you can begin to project the cost.
That's correct, on the dam itself.
Okay.
Occasionally, more than occasionally, you can spend as much money below ground doing a trench, a core trench, a cutoff trench, as you do above ground. We've done that a couple of times. We did not mention doing some biopsies, test holes on the area to make sure that not only what we have on the surface is good material, but also what kind of work Mother Nature has done in the last 100,000, 500,000 years as far as deposits.
Okay, so in other words there is if you're going to dam up a creek, what Mike's saying, let me make sure I got this, is you want to go in where the dam is actually going to sit and do some planning there, which means getting a machine, a backhoe or a track hoe, and dig some holes down and see what you have to go through, because you don't want water seeping under the dam. So what you got to do there is you got to figure out what kind of soils you have beneath, so you can be sure you can build this dam on a big, good, solid foundation.
That's correct.
So the core trench's job, so in other words, you got to dig below ground level in what's called a core trench. And what's the core trench's job?
To stop water from eroding under the dam.
Okay, so in other words, if there's a creek and it's been there for eons, chances are there's a lot of deposits that are below the creek.
The bigger the drainage area, the more deposits you're going to have. On a 10-acre drainage area, you're not going to have much of a clean out or much of a core trench. On a 500-acre drainage area, there will be a lot of deposits, and it will be not just in one spot. It's liable to have wandered all the way across the bottom where the dam is going to be.
There's one lake that Mike built, in particular about a 100-acre lake, 60 miles north of here, where I'm pretty convinced that he moved more dirt preparing to build the dam underground than he did above ground. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. It's a true statement. And this is the catch to that. The engineering firm had 15 borings across the center line of the dam, and they missed the deep creek every single time. The creek had wandered back and forth through the dam. On the surface, we knew exactly where it was, but once we got down 8, 9, 10, 12 feet below the surface, the creek from 500,000 years ago had wandered through there. There were river rocks, there was sand, there was gravel. All that had to be cut out of there.
And then refilled back in with compacted clay lifts.
That's correct.
Right.
So even when you do a core trench, even not a core trench, but even when you do test holes, that does not necessarily mean you're going to find everything that's below ground.
Okay. All right. Kenneth came back. He said, warm season grass is native. Timing the burn just before green up in the spring kills woody species, greens up in days, and provides habitat for native species and birds. Also, the roots are deeper and stronger than cool season grasses. Then I don't see anything problem with that. I don't see anything wrong with that.
I think that's actually a good idea when it's stated like that. It actually invigorates the new grasses.
Karen Wisher, glad you're on board. Victor Moberg, I know this isn't about construction, but how much damage can cormorants do to the fish in a pond? I've seen them eradicate fish in a pond. Cormorants, I can remember the first time I saw them in the early 80s was on a fish farm where they stocked 150,000 blue cat fingerlings about 3 to 4 inches long in the summer, fed them through, got them up to about 6 to 8 inches long, and a flock of cormorants stayed on that 15-acre lake the entire winter. The fish farmer got 1,500 blue cats back, and they all had scars on their backs. But in recreational fishing ponds, I've seen flocks and flights of cormorants completely decimate a fishery. Michael Gray, don't forget the swell factor on that dirt. That's a swell question. What's he talking about?
When dirt is brought into a dam, and if it's not compacted completely, it will shrink. Over a period of time, the dirt will fall back into place and become completely compacted. The rule of thumb is a structure that is built with a dozer will have a shrink factor of 10%. If the dam is 10 foot tall by design, you need to add another foot to it for the swell, the shrink factor. If it's built with a scraper, the shrink factor is 5%. Most of the time, if you're working with an engineering firm, they will determine how much swell and shrinkage there will be, and that will help them determine how much compaction and what you need to compact with. So if you're compacting with a sheep's foot roller, there won't be any shrinkage or swelling at all.
Okay, so proper construction is a big deal.
Yes.
What's I'm gonna veer off target a little bit. What's one of the funniest things that's happened lately?
I was digging a core trench. There was lots and lots of different veins of sand, gravel, water that showed up parallel with the core trench. The people that I'm working for, I told them, I said, whatever you guys do, come out here and see this. I've got something to show you. You're going to love it. So this guy came out, brought his wife, got his kids out of school. I took him down in the core trench and I showed him what I was looking at. He could see, he thought I needed to go to the bathroom. I was so excited. So So we showed him all of the different layers and told him that this was probably 1,000 years old, maybe 10,000 years old, and they all just sat there and looked at it, and he turned around and looked at me and he said, "Is that what you brought me out here for?"
Well, it was exciting to the nerd guy. Yeah, okay.
I loved it.
All right, Scott Lindsay says, "My pond doesn't currently leak. Am I good from now on? Any issues that could cause leakage? Or animals the only danger?"
Roots from trees, always deadly. If it's built out of a real fat clay, and the water level goes down, there will be cracks that will develop. Sometimes those things will cause problems. Most of the time, if they're solid when they start, they're going to continue to be solid. If you've got a problem, sometimes they will heal when they mature. Unfortunately, sometimes they don't.
All right. So the answer to that is who knows?
Yeah.
All right. John Henry just ordered the books. Thanks for doing that, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And let's see. Bear Brundrett says, "Speaking of decimation." Okay. We love Bear. Mike built a lake for Bear, I don't know, probably 25 or 30 miles from here. Really nice looking pond, nice looking lake. All right, Mike, this hour has flown by.
Boy, has it ever? We done?
No, we got about 4 minutes left. So just add water. Here's the deal tonight. If you buy Mike's book for $30, we'll throw in a ThePondBoss subscription for free. Perfect Pond is available as well. I think this one's $20. So, and the subscription to the magazine. By the way, don't forget, for those of you that are coming in later on, if you will put hashtag ThePondBoss magazine in the comments and click like on the video and share the video, then you're eligible for a drawing for a ThePondBoss hat and a mug. And we will do that next week. Let's see. Jim Fritsch says, "Any problem using well water to make up for seepage or erosion?"
There is no problem with that. Pump it out of the ground and try to pipe it into your lake if you can. If you have got a good place to dig a well, not every time that you put a hole in the ground are you going to come up with water. Sometimes the water you get is going to be salt water. You can buy a boat or fish attractors from just about anybody, but when you drill a water well, always use a local man because they will have some real good advice and some knowledge that's pretty valuable to you.
Here's something else. Write this down. 1 acre, 1 inch deep is 27,000 gallons. The question earlier in the show, where guy was asking about losing half an inch of water a day, which is about 15,000 gallons a day. If you do the math on that, that's 10 gallons a minute. So how big of a well do you need to support what you're wanting to do with that pond? So if you've got a 25-acre lake that's losing half an inch a day to evaporation, how big a well do you need? So you can figure all that out. We have one more question that was off topic a little bit, so I thought I'd save it till now. John Funk says, "Can you talk about small ponds in the water column? Maybe even bring into the talk testing and test kits for the DIY crowd. I'm not around when you have the show, but watch it once I'm home." There's a number of test kits, but I tell you, it's just as cheap to send water to a lab. I can't believe the phone's ringing in the middle of the night up here. Somebody calling from Tulsa, Oklahoma. So anyway, here we go. The test kits, you can buy test kits for a couple $100 that can test pH or alkalinity, but for $25 you can send a sample of water to the lab and get a real detailed answer to that. So Mike, what about anything that we haven't talked about planning to build a pond? Any other tips you can give right here at the end?
Don't be afraid to ask for help on this. Look at every pond you've seen. Talk to people that have already built them. Building the pond a lot of the time is as much fun as using it once you're done. You'll sure have as many memories. Make it fun. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Yes. Yeah. And you don't want to look back in 5 or 10 years and say, "I wish I hadn't done that."
Yes.
There's several other good tips is the more planning you do, the more happy you're going to be, the happier you're going to be with what you end up with. But here's another tip. There are things you won't know no matter what. Now, when somebody talks to me about building a pond, I tell them to figure out what it's going to cost and add 25%. And that way there's some unknowns. I remember you telling me a story one time about a pond you built where you bid the job, and then you got down about 12 feet below ground and you found some Model T parts.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's always unknowns. So plan for that. Don't let it consume you. But the more planning you do, the fewer surprises you're going to get, but you will have surprises.
Yes, sir. Well, we've never dug a pond anywhere where the dirt was uniform from the top to the bottom. This is the year 2018. They've been digging holes, burying stuff from the beginning of time, so you're going to find something.
Good.
Okay.
There you go. All right. Well, I'd like to thank Mike Otto for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Bob.
This has been
great fun. Yeah, I'll be back every week.
And thank you guys for tuning in. We deeply appreciate it.
Thanks for the questions.
You bet. And we'll look forward to talking to you next Wednesday, Valentine's Day. Unless we decide not to, because it's Valentine's Day. So we'll post on the ThePondBoss Facebook page. And don't forget about PondBoss Magazine, www.pondboss.com. Discuss things through the Ask the Boss forum. So you've got all kinds of resources out there. Be sure to take advantage of those, and we'll see you on the next go-round.
All right.